Ave Maria in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Welcome to Ave Maria in the Afternoon, examining the world through the lens of faith from the heart of the Church to help us navigate the culture. Here's Dr. Marcus Peter.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on this hour of Ave Maria in the Afternoon. I'm Marcus Peter. We're going to open this hour by talking about app culture, and this is what I mean. Smartphones started gaining popularity somewhere in the mid-2000s. Apple, at that point, frequently bragged that whatever you needed, there's an app for that. That was the line that was touted to us. Whatever you need, there's an app for that. In other words, their app store could suit any need you and I might have. Today, there are now dozens of great Catholic apps to help us grow in faith and virtue, and these apps are part of what Dr. William Gonch calls cognitive wellness culture. And unfortunately, we have swung to an overt extreme of the expression of cognitive wellness culture. There's an overt emphasis on wellness, overt emphasis on presence, on mindfulness, and in doing all of this, we've created a hyper-therapized culture, and therein lies the issue. To regain a sense of the fact that apps are tools to an end, and in this case, for the sake of building up our lives in faith and virtue. We go on from there to talk about an issue that I came across. I saw an article reporting about two men creating and destroying dozens of embryonic children in order to secure, the article called it designer offspring, that they would like to implant into wombs that they would rent, so surrogacy by their definition. And it's not simply an isolated tale of their own private lives. These two men, they're practicing homosexuals, and so they want these children for the sake of their adoption. This, I believe, presents a kind of cultural watershed moment. I think it's an exposition of the abyss that we have willingly descended into as a culture. We let this happen. I want to talk about how we got here, and I also want to talk about solutions forward, and that Christians ought to be rightly outraged for the frivolous murder of these children in the interest of creating the right designer children. And then after that, we will speak about Leo the 13th, beyond the encyclical Rerum Novarum, which many of us remember him for. Luke Arredondo joins us to talk specifically about this. And all this after the headlines.
Thanks, Marcus. Good afternoon, everyone. This is your Ave Maria Radio News for Monday, August 18th. It's the Feast of St. Helena. Today's news brought to you by Ave Maria University. Your location is at avemaria.edu. President Trump says it's been a very successful day in trying to broker a deal to end the Ukraine-Russian war.
Important discussions as we work to end the killing and stop the war in Ukraine. We're all working for the same goal, very simple goal. We want to stop the killing, get this settled.
The two are now meeting with U.S. European allies and the head of NATO at the White House. Trump said he believes there might be a three-way meeting soon involving himself, Zelensky, and Putin. Newsmax will pay $67 million to settle a lawsuit with Dominion Voting Systems. The lawsuit stems from debunked claims that the 2020 election results were fraudulent. Fox News also settled with Dominion in a similar lawsuit that saw a $787 million settlement in 2023. President Trump is pushing to eliminate mail-in ballots ahead of the 2026 midterm elections.
We, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country.
The president targets what he called highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial voting machines. Texas Democrats are returning to the state after breaking quorum to stop a Republican-led redistricting effort. Ken Martin, who heads the Democratic National Committee, praised their protest.
It wasn't easy for them to leave home and endure attacks from the GOP, but I'm so grateful to every Texas Democrat.
House Speaker Dustin Burrows says it's time for the legislature to get back to work.
We are done waiting. We have a quorum. Now is the time for action.
A redrawing of the state's congressional boundaries is seen as a way for the GOP to increase their power in Texas. And the U.S. Postal Service is set to honor former President Jimmy Carter with a commemorative Forever stamp. It will be available on October 1st, on the 101st anniversary of his birth. From your AveMariaRadio.net news desk, I'm Steve Clark.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. When smartphones started gaining popularity in the mid-2000s, Apple frequently bragged whenever anyone brought up even the slightest desire or request. They bragged that, oh, there's an app for that. Now, in other words, what they were trying to say is their app store could suit any need you might even potentially think of potentially having. And now there are dozens of great Catholic apps to help you and I grow in our faith and virtue. These apps are part of what Dr. William Gonch calls cognitive wellness culture. He joins us to talk about this in the grander picture. William Gonch is Assistant Professor and Director of Literature at Ave Maria University. He earned his PhD in English from the University of Maryland, College Park, and his MA in Creative Writing from Temple University. William, it's so great to speak with you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, and always a joy to connect with someone from Ave Maria University.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So, I want to start by saying this. How many apps are permitted on Ave's campus for the students to learn from?
Students have a pretty wide-ranging freedom. There are certain things that are banned, and we do have various modes and ways of helping students manage their use of apps, but they have a fair amount of freedom to make their own decisions about how plugged into app culture they want to be.
So I said that a little tongue-in-cheek, but I'm also fully aware that as academia continues to evolve, and not just at a tertiary level, even as we think about academics in the elementary to especially high school level, we're going to start seeing a greater expansion of digital technology. And unfortunately, right now we're seeing a lot of harm coming out of that, as well as good. I'm not going to negate the good that is happening. And this feeds into what you're bringing up, because this cognitive wellness culture is an overflow, if you will, of this grander issue of moralistic therapeutic deism. So tell us what you mean by this.
So cognitive wellness culture is a term I use to describe a variety of media and cultural space apps, but also books, podcasts, sort of social media influencers, that usually is oriented towards helping people essentially improve their lives by using tools developed by recent neuroscience, cognitive behavioral therapy very often. You see this there are dieting apps and lifestyle apps and kind of intellectual development apps, organizational tools, a lot of recent self-improvement writing, sort of what used to be called self-help books, are informed by sort of neuroscientific developments and the academic psychology as a way of what it offers to users is a way of sort of optimizing your life.
So, Bill, let me ask you very honestly, because immediately this is going to raise concerns. And like you, I'm one who was brought up in the largely empiricist worldview. Largely the sciences are good. But as we steep ourselves greater and greater in the liberal arts, we also see where there is a threshold where we can start being dehumanized by these scientific advancements.
Absolutely. So a lot of the issues are not necessarily the scientific advancement itself, but the form and mode in which it's used. God made the world, and knowing the world is good. And so I don't in any way want to suggest being anti-science.
Right.
But the way a lot of these apps work, and especially that mentality of optimizing your life, is tied to a voluntarism where you choose what you want your life to be, and then the app culture is there to help you achieve that goal. Whereas as Catholics, we know that God made us to love him and to live blessedly with him. We have a goal and we have an end that's built into our nature. Cognitive wellness culture can cause us to lose sight of that.
Right. And as we keep allowing ourselves to become more and more subsumed into the benefits we're gaining from the developed technology, like you mentioned, there's a certain moral neutrality to the instrument proper, but we have to be the moral safeguard. We in that sense, become true stewards of the morality of the instrument.
Absolutely.
So, just tell us more about that, especially in terms of educating students, and many of our listeners have children at the high school age and younger, so these things become great concerns for them.
That's a really good question. Thank you. I think that one of the key pieces, so it's true that we need to be stewards of the technology that we're using. The technology can be used for good or for ill, but no one of us can be a steward alone. And that's part of the argument that I'm making here. One of the dangers of an app that sort of aims to optimize your life, even if it's optimizing your life for prayer and your spiritual growth, which is good, is that by itself, it sort of places the user completely in control of their life, and in that case, the way they're going to grow spiritually or whatever the kind of growth they're pursuing is.
Right.
It's these kinds of tools, then they separate us from the people around us, and it's also the case when you're talking about parents with children, young people, college students who may not have well-formed habits about keeping things like social media in their proper place. Advice that I give all the time when asked is don't just rely on yourself to do this. If you, for instance, are overusing your phone, there are things that you can do, steps that you can take, but also ask a friend to check in, have an accountability partner. If you are plugged into a church community, a small group, or at Ave we have what are called households, which are residential groups that our students form, either they're male households and female households. Talk to your household about, if you're in a similar situation, how you all are going to use things like smartphones, because one, if you try to do it all yourself, it's going to be a lot harder, and two, God didn't make us to be autonomous, free, enlightenment, reasoning beings. The reason that we will do better if we're relying on one another is not just that it's sort of a more efficient way of achieving our individual goals. It's that our goals are interdependent because God made us for love, not for optimal utility.
So essentially what you're telling us is what the church has always been telling us, that yes, our growth in virtue is deeply personal, but we're not saved individually. Well, we're saved individually, but we're also saved within the context of the church and therefore communally. And the problem that this immediately raises when it comes to these apps is every one of them is designed to be inherently deeply personal. They're geared that way, and so that's going to present a challenge. We have to be the ones to tell ourselves, I'm not going to let this be the be-all, end-all of my walk in virtue.
Yes, 100%. That the apps, even when they're doing good, they're tied into this mode. So there's something very powerful in cognitive wellness culture that's I refer to it, it's usually referred to as finding your why. I bet a bunch of your listeners have heard of this, where you are asked, say you want to improve in fitness, you want to go to the gym more. Picture why you want to be healthier, what you want to do when you have gotten stronger, when you've gotten fitter, maybe travel you want to go on, or things you want to do, maybe living longer with your family. Like, picture that goal and then tie building the habit to achieving that goal. It's a very powerful thing. It's not in and of itself that there's anything wrong with it. There are certain desires that God places on each of our hearts that are tied to our life here below that we should be pursuing. But if your entire motivation is private that way, is internal, then it's going to be easy to close yourself off to what God is actually calling you to do.
Well, thank you very, very much, Bill. It was great speaking with you.
Yeah, great being on here. Thank you very much for having me. God bless.
My guest, Bill Gaunch, Assistant Professor of Ave Maria University.
This program brought to you in part by Ave Maria, Florida, a big kind of small town where golf carts take you everywhere and there's always something fun around the corner. Discover championship golf, resort-style amenities, and a town center full of shopping and dining. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at its heart, it's a community full of connection and charm. More than 25 model homes are available for viewing. More information can be found at AveMaria.com. That's AveMaria.com.
The Sistine Chapel Choir is coming back to Detroit on September 4th. Members of the Sistine Chapel Choir are returning to Detroit together with Dr. Elizabeth Lev to present the sights and sounds of Michelangelo's masterpiece. A quintet of our new Pope's Choir, Sixtini Cantoris, will bring the music of the world's oldest and finest choir from the Vatican to the St. John's Resort in the exquisite Monarch Ballroom for an evening full of unforgettable music. As you experience the timeless voices of members of the Sistine Chapel Choir, you will be inspired by sacred art historian Dr. Elizabeth Lev, who will present the captivating history and imagery of the chapel, a celebration of sacred tradition, artistic genius, and the eternal harmony between faith and culture. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience that you won't want to miss. Tickets are limited and are on sale now. Visit our website, www.ctscentral.net, to purchase your tickets and secure your spot today.
When the need for senior care arises, home is where the heart is. Visiting Angels provides home care for mom or dad up to 24 hours per day, including personal care, meals, and light housework. You may select your professional caregiver with Visiting Angels. More information at visitingangels.com or at 877-374-LIVE. That's 877-374-LIVE. Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I recently came across a post reporting two men creating and destroying dozens of embryonic children in order to secure a designer offspring that they would later implant into rented wombs or surrogates as they call them. This isn't simply an isolated tale of private immorality. It's a cultural watershed for us. I believe it's an exposing of the abyss into which you and I have willingly descended as a culture. The details are chilling. 40 eggs were purchased from a woman, and obviously she was injected with hormones to expel them all at once. 28 were fertilized, 18 were destroyed for failing genetic tests, and then 10 were left as candidates for implantation. These are not abstractions, they are children, human lives, discarded in a laboratory because they did not fit the standards of their purchases. This is not medicine, this is not progress, this is abortion and eugenics baptized in the language of choice and love. The very fact that such an act is legal and celebrated in some circles, even defended as a right, demonstrates the catastrophic unraveling of moral sanity in the West. But this moment did not appear from nowhere. It is the fruit of centuries of philosophical, political, and cultural decay. To understand this evil, we must confront the genealogy of ideas that permitted it, the psychological mechanisms that numb the consciences to it, and the demographic realities that reveal its futility, and the Catholic biblical worldview that alone can offer a way out of this abyss. Modernity began with the proclamation of human autonomy as the highest good. Descartes declared, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, a reduction of existence to subjective thought. Kant expanded this autonomy into a moral principle. Man is only free insofar as he is a law unto himself. And the implication was devastating. The objective order of creation rooted in God was dethroned. Morality became self-legislation. This enthronement of the self, detached from the Creator, metastasized across centuries. Nietzsche's announcement of the death of God and the rise of the Übermensch offered a philosophy in which man creates values, redefines morality, and imposes his will upon the world. Today's fertility clinics are temples of Nietzschean philosophy. The laboratory technician is the new priest, the incubator the new altar, and the embryo is the sacrificial victim. Human life is seen as raw material upon which man asserts his will. John Paul II diagnosed this trajectory in Evangelium Vitae. He lamented, Once man denies God, he ends up denying himself, his own dignity, and his own life. The creation and destruction of embryos for consumerist desire is precisely such a denial. Philosophy paved the way, but the law enshrined the lie. Roe v. Wade in 1973 institutionalized the notion that life in the womb is disposable. Once society accepted that unborn children could be killed for convenience, it was inevitable that embryos outside the womb would be discarded for imperfection. Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015 completed the inversion. Marriage, once recognized as a covenant between man and woman ordered toward family, was redefined as a contract of affection with no intrinsic orientation toward procreation. The logic was simple. If marriage is about adult desire rather than childbearing, then children become accessories to adult fulfillment, to be manufactured or discarded at will. And so the case before us is the logical consequence of these rulings. It's not enough to know that bad laws exist. We must also ask why ordinary people tolerate such evils. And here, psychology gives us the mechanisms at play. Commodification reduces persons to products. In the fertility industry, the child is spoken of not as son or daughter or persons, but as embryo, viable options, successful implantations. And once life is commodified, destruction is no longer murder, it's quality control. Objectification turns women into vessels. The womb, designed by God to be the holy sanctuary of life, cooperating with His work of creation, is here rented like real estate. The surrogate mother becomes a gestational carrier, her dignity subordinated to contract law. Cognitive dissonance enables people to live with this contradiction. To affirm human rights while endorsing embryo destruction requires a split consciousness. Language anesthetizes the conscience, embryo reduction instead of killing, donor egg instead of exploited women, and surrogacy instead of rented womb. Orwell warned us language could corrupt thought. Today it corrupts consciences. And herein lies the irony. While laboratories boast of creating designer babies, the West is suffering from the lowest birth rates in recorded history. Japan, Italy, Spain, much of Europe, the U.S. hover near demographic collapse. Even here in the U.S., once demographically vibrant, we've fallen below replacement. This contradiction exposes the futility of our cultural trajectory. The very societies spending billions to create life artificially are those that refuse to welcome life naturally. The obsession with technology masks a hatred of human fertility. Meanwhile, history teaches that cultures that refuse to reproduce cannot survive. Rome's decline was hastened by widespread infanticide and refusal to bear children. And by contrast, early Christians, who cherished life and family, outlasted empires, which I believe is going to happen again. Natural reason itself testifies to the truth. The telos, the purpose of sexual union, is procreation and the mutual good of spouses. To sever this union from procreation, it means to contracept, or even procreation from sex by means of IVF surrogacy, is to violate the integrity of human nature. Aristotle told us nature acts for an end. To frustrate that end is to act against reason and nature itself, and history offers sobering confirmation. Cultures that exalted family and fertility flourished. Cultures that despised them collapsed. Christianity triumphed in Rome not merely through preaching but through practice, caring for abandoned infants, honoring women, embracing fertility as a gift. Historian Rodney Stark observed that Christian families, by cherishing children, grew in number and vitality while pagan Rome withered. And today we face the same choice between a culture of death and a civilization of life. Only the Catholic biblical worldview preserves human dignity. Genesis declares that man and woman are created in the image of God. Psalm 139 testifies, "You knit me together in my mother's womb." From conception, the human person is sacred. The Catechism states human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception. This teaching makes clear why abortion, euthanasia, and assisted suicide are not simply issues among many. They are foundational. Without life, no other right exists. To equate them with immigration or tax policy is catechetical ignorance. Prudential judgment governs how to handle immigration. It cannot justify murder. Thus, Catholics must reject the false equivalents that often advance in our political discourse, because the deliberate killing of the innocent, whether by abortion, embryo destruction, or euthanasia, belongs to a different moral category than policy debates, including things like immigration, because they are what's known as part of the proportionate hierarchy of moral goods. To collapse right to life issues into quality of life issues as one same category is to betray scripture and tradition. What then must be said? Designer baby programs and rented wombs are new slavery. Just as human bodies were once sold on auction blocks, now women's bodies and children's lives are trafficked in laboratories, clinics, and petri dishes. Christians cannot remain silent. Isaiah thundered, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil." The church must recover clarity in this. This isn't about compassion for adult desires. It's about defending the voiceless. Abortion, euthanasia, assisted suicide, embryo destruction, they're non-negotiables. Catholics who blur these distinctions surrender to the spirit of the age and arguably to demonic forces itself. But hope remains for us, because the antidote to this demographic collapse and technological tyranny is not further innovation, it's ancient wisdom. Heterosexual monogamous marriage, lived in faith, open to many children. That's the solution. Families anchored in religious life, daily prayer, sacraments, fidelity. These are the true incubators of human flourishing. Sociological research confirms that religious families are more stable, more fertile, and more joyful. What secularism sees as a burden, multiple children, is in fact the seed of renewal. John Paul II reminded us the future of humanity passes by way of the family. That truth resounds louder now than ever. If Catholics live it, they will outlast the culture of death as surely as the early church outlasted Rome. The story of 28 embryonic children created and destroyed for adult desire is a mirror to our civilization. It's not progress, it's decrepit regression. It's not compassion, it's cruelty. The abyss is real, but the cross and the resurrection are even more real. So let's stand with Christ, stand with His church, stand with the culture of life, and let's walk the way of Christ, defend the dignity of every human life, because Christ is the Lord of life. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
Looking for a retreat venue for your youth group, sports team, ministry, or staff event? St. Francis Retreat Center in DeWitt sits on a picturesque 95-acre property, complete with 3 large conference rooms, 2 chapels, 2 dining rooms with commercial kitchens, meeting spaces for smaller groups, overnight lodging, and a professional staff to make your event a success. Call 517-669-8321 or visit stfrancis.ws to book your event today.
Ave Maria in the Afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
Hi, I'm Dr. Marcus Peter, host of Ave Maria in the Afternoon and Unveiling the Covenants. Ave Maria Radio has been at the forefront of dialoguing faith at the intersection of all things pertaining to human flourishing. We need your help. Our infrastructure is in urgent need of updating. We want to ask you to support us in this summer campaign. Every gift, no matter how big or small, will be useful to bringing the gospel to the ends of the earth. Thank you. You are broadcasting hope with us.
Remember to take a minute this week to thank a priest you know for all the blessings he shares through his vocation. Our priests work tirelessly to bring us the sacraments and help us on our journey to heaven. Let's encourage them and express our gratitude for all of their sacrifices, like thank you for baptizing our children. Nominate your priest at thankyoufforyourpriesthood.com. A new contest every month through September 2025. Brought to you by Diocesan, your Catholic advertising and communications company.
Fire on the Earth's Peter Herbeck.
Without the light that comes from Christ, we walk in darkness. And darkness is a way of describing this fallen world in which we don't know why we're here even. We can't touch meaning because we ultimately can't see God, and we can't be satisfied because we were made for God. We were made as this entire creation. The whole cosmos was made to the glory of God. It all exists to reveal the glory and the majesty, the beauty, the complexity, the creative love and power of God. And all of it gives praise to Him, except for fallen angels and rebellious human hearts. We're made literally to live for the glory of God, to worship Him, to give thanks to Him. That's what heaven is. It's not just a big prayer meeting, but it is the full celebration of free souls and creatures just overwhelmed by the majesty and beauty of God. And we're sharing in it. We're not just watching it like we do on a movie, that when it's over, it's over. We're in it. We're sharing in the life. And it's total and absolute fulfillment. We can't hardly even imagine what that's like. The best we can do in this world is to have some measure of distraction or something that makes me feel good temporarily. Or temporary goals that we kind of have hope in. Those intermediate goals are good goals, but they don't solve the big problem. They don't produce genuine heart that brings peace to the soul and transformation.
Peter Herbeck spreads fire on the earth, weekday mornings at 6:30 and again at 11:45 on Ave Maria Radio. Ave Maria School of Law is the Roman Catholic law school in the United States. Consistently ranked in the Princeton Review as one of the best and most conservative law schools, as well as pre-law's most devout law school. Ave Maria School of Law provides a traditional legal education while emphasizing how the law intersects with the Catholic intellectual tradition and natural law philosophy. Ave Maria School of Law, unabashedly Catholic, consistently excellent. For more information, visit avemarialaw.edu.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Leo the 14th took on the name Leo and shortly after announced exactly why he did this. And we often remember the legacy of his predecessor, Leo the 13th, by means of his encyclical Rerum Novarum. Joining me to talk about Leo the 13th beyond just that encyclical, to his grander contribution to the life of the Church and her intellectual tradition, is Luke Arredondo. Luke is Director of Faith Formation for the St. Philip Institute of Catechesis and Evangelization in the Diocese of Tyler, Texas. He received his PhD in Religious Studies from Florida State University and his MA in Theological Studies from Notre Dame University, Notre Dame Seminary in New Orleans. Luke, great to speak with you. How are you?
I'm very great, Marcus. Thanks for having me. I would love to have graduated from Notre Dame up north, but my Notre Dame was a lot sweatier.
I apologize for that. I've gotten so used to saying Notre Dame University, and I'm very, very well acquainted with Notre Dame Seminary. Now,
yes.
But just as you and I are well acquainted with the name of the present Pope, it's actually amazing to me that we seem to only speak of Leo the 13th in the terms of Rerum Novarum. I sort of understand why, but I want to invite your insight here, because the man had a tremendous contribution to the intellectual tradition over and above Rerum Novarum.
Absolutely, and this really was kind of the accident that led me to write a dissertation about Leo the 13th. Was a conversation I was having with one of my advisors, and she just asked me, does anybody ever write about, the other stuff Leo the 13th did besides Rerum Novarum? And of course there's some small ways in which you can say yes to that, but mostly the answer seems to be no. People focus on this really excellent encyclical from 1891, but he wrote 86 encyclical letters. There's a lot more to his corpus, and he was Pope for nearly 25 years, 1878 to 1903. So there is indeed a much broader contribution to certainly, as you said, the intellectual patrimony of the Church, but also even ways in which the papacy is understood.
Mm-hmm.
We look at popes very differently now than we did when he became Pope in 1878, and in many ways, just the way the office is treated and sort of the functions of the Pope that we expect today really have their most direct heritage in the way that he embodied that papal office.
Right.
It's a very interesting picture when you try and look at kind of the entirety of his pontificate and how valuable and influential it was for the Church.
Before we go deeper into the intellectual inquiry, I know we don't quite have a lot of time in two short segments, but would you mind sharing? So you devoted your doctoral research to the work of Leo XIII, and so you had a vested interest, a personal, dare I say, emotional vested interest as well, in this man and his legacy. And so when the name Leo XIV was declared, what was going through your mind?
Oh, I completely lost control of my emotions when I heard the Latin Leonum Decimum Quattrum.
Mm-hmm.
I shouted at the top of my lungs, "He chose Leo!" I just freaked out and scared everybody. My bishop says that was his favorite memory of that day. But when I came back down to earth a little bit, I began wondering, are we going to see another encyclical on the Bible? Really, that was my first serious thought. Or what is, what is his sort of, are we going to get an update on the Catholic view of philosophy? I mean, Titus et Ratio is the last major document. It's not as though we have no clue what the Church thinks about philosophy today, but it has been since 1998 that we got a major papal document on that. So, yeah, my wheels started turning about what kind of things is he going to write that are going to bear this obvious, connection to his predecessor, Leo XIII. And then when he said publicly that this was where he chose the name, I really started thinking along those lines. I'm most excited about the concept that we have an Augustinian pope who might want to write us an encyclical about the Bible or a series of teachings about the Bible. So what that would look like and kind of how that can reinvigorate what I think is already a flourishing area in the Church, but one that you can never exhaust is, turning us to the Scriptures. So I'm very excited, very hopeful, but I'm also sort of steeped in anticipation about what he will do that will bear out this connection to his predecessor.
And dare I conjecture from there, maybe even something to the effect of the rapprochement between faith and reason from a distinctly Augustinian perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you mentioned faith and reason. The way that I kind of see, at the most basic level, the overview of Leo's papacy, Leo XIII's papacy, is trying precisely to reconcile how in the modern world, in his modern world, which is not altogether dissimilar from ours today, how we can maintain this balance between faith, which comes to us as a gift and through divine revelation, is strengthened. How can we maintain that supernatural part of our life alongside human reason? So the gift of faith in concert with the natural capacity for reason. So philosophical reason and logic and every kind of natural reason, how that is oriented toward strengthening our understanding of divine revelation, and how it is a preparation for understanding revelation. And so I kind of look at Aeterni Patris and Providentissimus Deus as his most important single documents, and then interpreting those appropriately, I think, is the best way to read his other documents.
Honestly, looking at Providentissimus Deus as a kind of groundwork for how he thinks about the Scriptures, and like you mentioned, Aeterni Patris for his intellectual heritage, it really does give you a pedagogical sense, or at least an interpretive key of where he went in his papacy. Now, from there, if we can talk about the history of his entry into the papacy a little, Pius IX, by the tail end of his papacy, we're looking at some major socio-political upheaval in that part of Central Europe. Yes.
Yeah, Leo's entrance to become Pope for Leo XIII was a very big surprise at the death of Pius IX. So he was named as Camerlengo, which means that he would be in charge of the proceedings during the conclave. And traditionally, although it's not any kind of formal law, the Camerlengo does not have, shouldn't be considered as the next Pope. That's sort of the custom. So, especially because he had been named as Camerlengo, and because his ecclesial career really had fits and starts about it, and he was kind of a bishop of an obscure diocese after sort of bungling some, affairs in Belgium, that just nobody really thought he would be Pope. Now, of course, oh my gosh, I'm getting an emergency alert on my phone, and I can do nothing about that.
So
I think it ended.
Oh, thank the Lord. Okay.
Oh gosh, a child trafficking alert just overrides everything.
No, please continue. Yeah.
So, Leo XIII was looked at as an outside shot at best. He was also old and considered frail, but he wound up, having the nomination specifically with the idea that he would be a temporary caretaker pope. One of the cardinals, shortly after the election said, well, we don't really think he's going to be able to live very long. So this is a sort of a stepping stone from this very long papacy of Pius IX. And then Leo was reinvigorated and lived quite a long time. He had a rocky relationship with many of the cardinals who kind of tried to keep him in an outsider role. What brought him into the fore, really, was his excellent job shepherding his diocese of Perugia. He reinvigorated the formation of priests there. He focused on the social welfare of people, providing health care and food. And his mother was a Third Order Franciscan, and he lived that out in his episcopacy.
My guest is Luke Arredondo, and amongst his many achievements, he has also penned this article in Church Life Journal entitled Leo XIII, Beyond Rerum Novarum, and we are trying to greater bring out the historical legacy, but also just the pastoral legacy and writing legacy of Leo XIII. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
My dad, sharp as a tack, but getting him out for a dentist trip got harder every year. When he moved to the senior residence where he lives now, Dr. Mansour's portable dental service was a godsend. Dr. Mansour comes to wherever the homebound patient may be, whether in a nursing facility or the comfort of home. All the services you'd expect in a dentist office brought straight to the patient's door. Call 586-873-5567. That's 586-873-5567 or portabledentalservices.com.
I don't think we've replaced our siding since we moved in 20 years ago. But I'm sure it's still fine, right?
We'd better call Mighty Dog Roofing of Ann Arbor.
Damaged siding can cause mold buildup and weaken your home structure. Protect your family by calling local Catholics Dan and Mary Flanagan at Mighty Dog Roofing for a free inspection of your siding, roof, or windows. Mighty Dog Roofing, 734-224-4916. That's 734-224-4916. Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
One person doesn't like the Mona Lisa, the second person does. And the third person says, well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's a popular saying, we know that. Remember, though, that beauty is an element of being. It describes what a thing is. And because it is an element of being, while we talk about beautiful paintings and buildings, we also talk about beautiful persons. We know that Grandma Kuzno is beautiful. We know that our children are beautiful. It even gives us joy to see the cleaning lady in the halls of school because she, too, carries a radiance of beauty. And if someone were to contradict you, if someone were to say, your consideration of Grandma Kuzno's beauty is just your own subjective opinion, we would know that person is wrong. Because beauty is not in the eye of the beholder, it is in my grandmother, it is in my child. GuadalupeWorkers.org.
Michigan's Catholic Biblical School Ministry unpacks every book of the Bible to deepen your relationship with God. Engaging talks from live expert teachers make reading the Bible a prayerful, inspiring part of our faith. These adult faith formation classes start this September in dozens of parish locations and online. Learn more at cbsmich.org. That's cbsmich.org.
St. Therese once told her sister Celine that when we trust ourselves and not God, our soul becomes barren and incapable of virtue. Her remedy? External works of charity. We all try to do it on our own sometimes without asking for God's help. At St. Paul Evangelization, we suggest sharing the gospel with someone who needs it. Check out streetevangelization.com to find a team near you where you can share the love of Jesus. If there isn't one in your area yet, perhaps God is calling you to start a team in your city. To learn more, visit streetevangelization.com.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm speaking with Luke Arredondo, who is the Director of Faith Formation for the St. Philip Institute of Catechesis and Evangelization in the Diocese of Tyler, Texas. So, Luke, let's pick up where we left off here. One of the things that you had started with, which you rightly explicate in your article, is that we owe a lot of how we understand the modern office of the papacy to the way Leo XIII conducted himself. Now, like you mentioned in the article, that's a lot to unpack, but let's talk about some of the mountain pieces here.
Sure. Well, one is the frequency of writing and of issuing encyclicals and reviving the use of encyclicals as a teaching vehicle. Mm-hmm. There were something like 50 encyclicals written in the 2 centuries prior to Leo's papacy, total. And he wrote 86 during his 25 years. Yep. That's a major change, and it's not one that then dies with Leo, right? We now, rightfully or wrongfully, we expect a pope to issue encyclical letters to tell us what are the important concerns that he has. Right. And that really didn't happen until he just strongly took up this instrument of teaching during his papacy. Part of that was he was trapped at the Vatican; he couldn't go anywhere, and readership and printing and the publication of these encyclicals was easier. But nonetheless, he really took it and grabbed a hold of that as a major teaching vehicle. Right. Another is actually doing interviews with the press. He did a few, not a ton of them, and of course the press had to come to him because he couldn't leave the Vatican. Mm-hmm. Also presence in the media. I mean, he's the first pope that we have video footage of. So these are just a couple quick things. The primary thing I think of when I say that is the idea of the encyclical as this is what we expect to see out of a pope. Right. That has not changed since his papacy, and it really was a new thing in the way and the seriousness with which he approached using encyclical letters.
If I may invite you to conjecture just a little, between the loss of the papal states and also the utilization of encyclicals and the media video, that change of trajectory from the papal office being a governor of these states to now being ubiquitous, being universal, and being available on the media, I wonder if you could comment on how that reshaped the trajectory of the papal office.
Yes. Well, I think it gave your typical Catholic a much greater sense of the personality of the Pope and not merely the office, right? I mean, surely people knew that Pius IX was the name of the Pope, but I really don't think that there was much of a sense of what his personality was like. Certainly by the time Leo dies, he has become a personality. And as media and technology have changed and developed, that has only increased all the more. I mean, we've seen this, the media today talking, it's been 100 days since Leo XIV was elected, and what have we learned in these first 100 days? It's not going to go away because media is pervasive now. Yeah. And this really had its slowest beginning, but a real beginning in Leo XIII's lifetime. And you see this at his death. He died in 1903, and there were a huge slew of biographies published that year. I've got a couple of them on my shelf that are hard copies from 1903, and they're very, very thick books that looked at his personal records. He opened up his private correspondence to scholars to research his life, and that's just a very different sort of face of the papacy than what we had prior to his time.
Considering that, and I want to talk about Aeterni Patris specifically, the real resurgence, if you will, surge of the study of Thomism because of his heritage, being trained by Thomistic Jesuits, which today might sound a bit of an irony, but being being schooled by Thomistic Jesuits and just the wondrous surge of Thomism that we owe today in Neo-Thomism to that initial heritage.
Absolutely. So Leo was taught in Roman seminaries by what was sort of a minority movement of these Jesuits who were in Rome and very interested in Aquinas. One of them said personally, in his own personal testimony later, one of his teachers in the seminary said that he studied modern philosophy and began to have a lot of doubts, and then when he turned to Aquinas, the doubts went away. And so he felt, as an instructor of these young men preparing for the priesthood, that he needed to give them the certainty that Aquinas brought. Leo imbibed that very much. Leo was an excellent student. He was very gifted in Latin and particularly enjoyed writing Latin poems for leisure. But when he became a bishop, he was already very actively thinking about how to bring about a renewed emphasis on Aquinas for his own diocesan priests. So he established an academy of St. Thomas in Perugia and revitalized priestly education along those lines. So then when he becomes the Pope, he simply takes that experience that he had growing up in the seminary, in his own ministry as a diocesan bishop, and applies that to the Church Universal. So he begins a sort of an overhaul of the faculties of Roman seminaries and puts priority on Aquinas. He brings in some of the experts that were sort of part of this minority movement and gives them teaching positions at the Gregorian, where they're going to train priests that are going throughout the world. And this starts a slow thing that is still going. He wanted a new scholarly edition of the entire corpus of Aquinas. I'm sure you know from your time at Ave Maria, they're not done with it yet, but it's getting close. It has taken since the 1870s to finish, collecting this. I mean, Aquinas published 8 million words in his lifetime. But what's the reason that he wants to go to Aquinas? I think is because Aquinas understood maybe better than anybody else the way that reason and revelation go together. The service of reason to help us to understand and prepare for revelation, and the way that revelation gives us the certainty that we need to guide reason. When you try and divorce them from one another, you end up with varying kinds of problems, either a fundamentalist fideism or a sort of rationalist view of the world. And what Aquinas was able to balance really well was the necessity of human reason within its limits, open to divine revelation and serving divine revelation. Right. And this is why I see, Attorney Patris in concert with Providentissimus Deus. But in Attorney Patris, you see Aquinas not the primary subject of that encyclical. He's in there for sure. But what Leo's trying to trace in that document is the way the church has engaged with philosophy, going back to the patristic era. He talks about Paul being wary of vain philosophy, and then he sort of sketches out what you see John Paul II do in a little bit more detail, right, in Fides et Ratio. Mm-hmm. How has the church sifted through the good of philosophical systems and taken key ideas from them and utilized those in the service of theology? We've got to always be open to that process. And Leo points to Aquinas because Aquinas does this very well. What does Aquinas do more than offer his own answers? He assembles the best answers. He looks to the philosopher. He looks to Augustine. He looks to, Pseudo-Dionysius and the scriptures, and he kind of assembles all of the best information together to give us a thorough understanding of things. And it's this method of Aquinas to sort of rely on a vast array of sources and find the line of truth that I think Leo is really trying to draw us to by calling our attention to Aquinas. And he even notes that Aquinas does not have the answer to every question, right? But the wisdom of Aquinas, the clarity of Aquinas, where Aquinas is sure of things, this is where we need to draw our minds, and to the commentary tradition that has continued to expand on things that Aquinas didn't address in his own lifetime because it wasn't fitting. So that resurgence in Thomism, this is a major consequence of Leo's papacy that we still feel. I mean, one of my favorite authors is Fulton Sheen. I love to talk about Sheen all the time. My son is named Fulton. His training to study philosophy and as a way to understand and how to answer the modern world, like Fulton Sheen's dissertation, would not have happened without Leo revitalizing and reshaping priestly formation to emphasize Aquinas. So it's a really fascinating thing when you start to think about the dominoes that fell when Leo said we've got to get to a deeper study of Aquinas and a better set of his own texts. I mean, the PhD program down at Ave Maria would not be around if Aquinas had not been revitalized in Leo XIII's time. I mean, just think of that alone. It's fascinating, the impact that we're still feeling as a result of that single document.
Truly, and not just the document, but the very directed, careful approach, like you mentioned. He could have just sung the praises of Aquinas and said, "Therefore, go memorize everything Aquinas wrote." But
right,
it was a method he was trying to put forth for us.
Yes, I really think that's the most balanced way to read the encyclical, and so there are champions of Aeterni Patris who might not see that nuance, and then there are critics of Aeterni Patris who might say, "Oh, Leo's so lazy. Tell us to go read this medieval writer in the modern world. Like that's going to fix our problems. Like how short-sighted are you? You know, or how nostalgic are you?" But he's not really doing either of those things. He's doing something else that I think is frequently missed by people who aren't attentive to the very small details of the way that he argues in that text.
I couldn't agree more. And again, it became one of the paradigms within which one can, I at least, approach the study of Aquinas, which also tells you that you don't need to read Thomists to understand Thomas. You read Thomas and understand his method.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I love the way you put it.
Luke, real joy to connect with you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Absolutely.
My guest has been Luke Arredondo. He's the Director of Faith Formation for the St. Philip Institute of Catechesis and Evangelization in the Diocese of Tyler, Texas. Now, amongst the many legacies and lessons and traditions that we receive from Leo XIII, perhaps one of it is an immersion in all the knowledge that has come before us in the study of Aquinas. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.